Greetings to our channel. Today we will talk about an outstanding personality whose ideas and actions have changed the course of history. We will talk about Martin Luther King, a man who dedicated his life to the struggle for equality and justice. A brief overview of the life and achievements of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a leader of the civil rights movement in the United States. He is known for his nonviolent methods of struggle and inspiring speeches that still resonate in the hearts of people around the world. His life and activities have become a symbol of the struggle for human rights and social justice. The purpose of the video and its significance for the viewers. In this video, we will look at the key moments of Martin Luther King's life, his achievements and legacy. We hope that his example will inspire you to your own development and striving for justice. Let the story of this great man become a source of motivation for you and a reminder that each of us can change the world for the better. Chapter 1. Early Years and Education, Childhood and Family. Martin Luther King was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, into the family of a Baptist minister. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was an influential religious leader, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, was a teacher. In his childhood, Martin faced racial discrimination, which greatly influenced his worldview and desire to fight for equality. Education and early steps in public activity. King was an outstanding student and graduated from school at the age of 15. He entered Morehouse College, where he studied sociology. During this time, he began to actively participate in public activities and joined the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. After graduating from college, he continued his studies at Crozer Theological Seminary and Boston University, where he earned a Ph.D. The influence of religion and philosophy on King's views. During his studies, King became acquainted with the ideas of nonviolent resistance preached by Mahatma Gandhi. These ideas had a huge impact on his philosophy of the civil rights struggle. King also drew inspiration from Christian teachings on love and justice, which became the basis of his approach to the fight for equality. Chapter 2. The beginning of the civil rights struggle. Return to Atlanta and the beginning of pastoral work. After completing his education, Martin Luther King returned to Atlanta and became a pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where his father served as senior pastor. During this time, he began to actively participate in the civil rights movement, inspired by the ideas of nonviolent resistance. The Montgomery Bus Boycott. In 1955, King led the Montgomery bus boycott in Alabama after the arrest of Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. The boycott lasted 381 days and led to a U.S. Supreme Court decision declaring segregation on public buses unconstitutional. This success made King a national leader of the civil rights movement. Formation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. In 1957, King, along with other civil rights leaders, founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, an organization aimed at mobilizing African Americans for nonviolent struggle for equality. King became the first president of the SCLC and used this platform to organize mass protests and civil disobedience campaigns. King's role in the civil rights movement. In the following years, King continued to actively participate in the civil rights movement, organizing marches, boycotts, and other protests. He became a symbol of nonviolent resistance and inspired millions of people around the world with his determination and dedication to the cause of justice.
Chapter 3. The March on Washington and I Have a Dream. Preparation for the March on Washington. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders began preparing for a large-scale march on Washington for jobs and freedom. The goal of the march was to draw attention to issues of racial discrimination and economic inequality, as well as to urge the government to pass laws protecting civil rights. The March on Washington, on August 28, 1963, more than 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. to participate in the march. This event became one of the largest and most significant in the history of the civil rights movement. The participants of the march demanded equal rights and opportunities for all Americans regardless of race. The I Have a Dream speech. During the march, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech, which became a symbol of the struggle for equality and justice. In his speech, King expressed hope for a future where people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This speech inspired millions of people around the world and strengthened King's position as a leader of the civil rights movement. Impact of the March on Washington. The March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech had a tremendous impact on public opinion and contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed racial discrimination in public places, workplaces, and educational institutions. This law was an important step towards equality and justice in the United States. Chapter 4: The Struggle for Voting Rights and the Nobel Peace Prize. The struggle for voting rights. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders focused their efforts on the struggle for voting rights. In the southern states of the USA, black citizens faced numerous obstacles when attempting to register to vote, including literacy tests and intimidation. The March from Selma to Montgomery. In March 1965, King led a series of marches from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, to draw attention to the issue of disenfranchisement of black Americans. The first march, known as Bloody Sunday, ended in violent dispersal by the police. However, subsequent marches attracted thousands of participants and gained widespread public support. The Voting Rights Act of 1965. The efforts of King and other activists led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which banned discriminatory practices that prevented voter registration. This law was an important step towards ensuring equal voting rights for all U.S. citizens. The Nobel Peace Prize. In 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent struggle for civil rights. He became the youngest recipient of this prestigious award at that time. King donated the monetary part of the prize to support the civil rights movement. King's influence on the world stage. The Nobel Peace Prize strengthened King's international recognition and influence. He continued to advocate for human rights and social justice not only in the USA but also around the world. His ideas of nonviolent resistance inspired many movements for freedom and equality in various countries. Impact of the March on Washington. The March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech had a tremendous impact on public opinion and contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed racial discrimination in public places, workplaces, and educational institutions. This law was an important step towards equality and justice in the United States. Chapter 5: The Final Years and Legacy. The Poor People's Campaign. In the final years of his life, Martin Luther King Jr. began the Poor People's Campaign, aiming to draw attention to economic inequality and poverty in the United States. He believed that the struggle for civil rights should also include the fight for economic justice. Opposition to the Vietnam War. King also spoke out against the Vietnam War, considering it unjust and a diversion of resources from addressing domestic issues in the United States. His stance on this issue drew criticism from some supporters, but King remained true to his principles of nonviolence and social justice. Assassination and reaction. On April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. His death sparked a wave of protests and riots across the country, as well as deep mourning and condemnation of violence. King was buried in Atlanta, Georgia, where thousands of people came to pay their respects. King's legacy. The legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. continues to live on today. His ideas and principles of nonviolent resistance inspire new generations of activists and human rights advocates. In 1983, a national holiday was established in the United States in honor of Martin Luther King Jr., celebrated every third Monday in January. Impact on modern society. King's impact on modern society cannot be overstated. His struggle for equality and justice led to significant changes in legislation and public consciousness. Today, his name is synonymous with the fight for human rights and social justice around the world. Conclusion: inspiration for future generations. Martin Luther King Jr. left an indelible mark on the history of humanity. His life and work serve as a powerful source of inspiration for all who strive for justice, equality, and peace. His example shows that each of us can contribute to creating a better world. Principles of Nonviolence and Love. King taught us that nonviolence and love are powerful tools for achieving social change. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance continues to inspire activists around the world, reminding us of the importance of compassion and understanding in the fight for justice. A living legacy. The legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. lives on in the hearts and minds of millions of people. His ideas and principles continue to influence modern society, inspiring us to fight for human rights and social justice. We must remember his words and actions, striving for peace and equality for all. A call to action. In conclusion, I urge you to think about how you can contribute to creating a just and equal society. Let the example of Martin Luther King Jr. inspire you to take actions aimed at improving the world around us. Together, we can continue his work and make the world better for future generations. Thank you for watching this video. I hope the story of Martin Luther King has inspired you as much as it inspires millions of people around the world. Let his words and actions become a source of reflection and motivation for you. Each of us can contribute to the creation of a just and equitable society. Remember that change starts with each of us. Let's strive for peace, justice, and equality, inspired by the example of Martin Luther King.